to Ypsilanti Area Discussers, the Ypsilanti podcast made by Ypsilanti people for everybody. My name is Mark Hergott, and I am here with my friend, my collaborator, my campaign teammate, Ginger Chase. Ginger, how have you been?
Hi Mark, thanks for the introduction. I've been good. Really excited since Alyshia Dyer won her campaign for Washtenaw County Sheriff.
So this week has been a bit of a whirlwind. What was your Tuesday like?
Oh, well, I woke up a little before 6 o'clock and headed over to Ryan Yaples' business in Scioto Township to get lit, to zhuzh people up, to get people excited. And then I went out to the WISD, which is also in Scioto Township, which is one of the most heavy voting places in the county. I went to hand out lit and to talk with voters as they came in to vote. And I spent about 2 of those 4 hours in the rain. As we all know, Tuesday was a very rainy day here in Washtenaw County, and made a whole lot of Facebook Lives while I was out there. I spent the first 2 hours with some other local candidates, and then I came back to Ryan's business in Scioto and spent 5 hours making phone calls to Alyshia supporters, just making sure that they got out to the polls. Oh, and then I came back to my house to take care of my cat and meet my friend who was bringing some cookies for Alicia's event in the evening, and then headed over to the Elks Lodge to be with Alyshia and other supporters as we were watching the results come in from the county.
Just over 50,000 people voted for sheriff. Alyshia got a net positive of 384 votes compared to her principal opponent, Derek Jackson. How do you feel about that?
Oh, well, I mean, I feel like all the hard work really counted, right? It really, really mattered. When I was working on this campaign, I've been at it for 2.5 years or so, since Alyshia really started thinking about doing it and started jumping in, jumped in with both feet. It really, all that hard work, all the individual people I talked with, it really made a difference, that it was so close, that all that one-on-one, all the events that I went to, that it really, really mattered to do that work. That I would tell people that, Alyshia started out people thinking that she was an underdog, and, as a police officer, as a deputy, she did a lot of work in Ypsilanti Township, and people knew her there. And so I knew that she had a pretty good base of people who knew and respected her, but I really think that, just all that hard work was really necessary and paid off. So I would tell people that she has a good shot, but every vote counts, right? So sometimes when people think, oh, somebody's got it, they don't think that they really need to vote or that they really need to donate. So yeah, I feel like all the hard work paid off. And I was joking earlier that it's a bit like a pyramid scheme sometimes, where you tell somebody, and that they tell somebody, and then some, and so on, and you sort of build this kind of network of, people that learn about Alyshia, indirectly through you, right? So it feels good that she won, and I feel like, it felt good to be a part of that, but, yeah, it was a tight race.
What did you learn over these last 2.5 years about yourself, about democracy, about Washtenaw County?
Yeah, I mean, so when I started working on this, I was kind of traumatized from the pandemic, like I think a lot of people were. I'm a massage therapist by profession, and I felt really cut off from people. I was trying to keep myself and my clients and, my aging parents safe, and I moved during the pandemic. I broke up with somebody during the pandemic. So I was coming from kind of this, hyper-vigilant place, right? And working on her campaign really kind of forced me to get out of myself. And I, sort of relearned how to be social through this. I think that it was really good for me to be able to focus locally, because, like 4 years ago, it was really traumatic. The national politics was really, or maybe it was 8 years ago at this point, that was really traumatic. And, so having, a focus that's local, I mean, I tell people that, your vote goes further locally, you have more sway, you have more influence around the people that, locally, goes further. And so being able to put my energy there was really helpful for me personally. I think it made me realize that, that I can do things, right? That I can, be somebody who, has a voice. As a massage therapist, I love my clients and the work is great, but it's not about me and it's not about my voice. And so I think that it was really helpful for me to have a place where, where I got to be, where I got to write and I got to speak and I got to talk with people and interact with people. So it really was helpful for me in terms of my own personal growth and, just sort of understanding kind of like the nuance of local politics. I think, you and I were talking earlier about in some ways how hard it is because you know people and it's personal in a different way. But yeah, I think overall it was, it brought me to a new place of self-confidence for sure.
My friend and neighbor Amber Fellows won her election by 8 votes.
Wow.
8 votes. That actually, extrapolating it, Alyshia won her election by the equivalent of about 8 votes.
Right, proportionally.
I think it's a good time to remind all of the listeners, all 12 of you, I'm so glad for every one of you, that if you are thinking of supporting someone in the local election, you need to support them with your whole heart and body because every vote counts. And I think that's one of the things that I learned over this election. What do you hope for in a Dyer administration?
Oh, I think the accountability and transparency is huge. I got to this point on election day where I really realized that, or maybe re-realized that, Alyshia is an adult, is such an adult in that she's willing to look at what's not working, willing to take accountability of anything in her life that's not working, because the only way to make change is to acknowledge what's not working, right? So I think that, having somebody in office who is there for the people, can acknowledge what works and what doesn't. She doesn't sugarcoat things. She doesn't lie about things. Her sense of self isn't diminished if things aren't perfect. So there's that. I think there's so many. I'm looking forward to like the honesty, like having somebody in office who's actually honest about what's going on and how things are affecting the community. I mean, like that to me, the first year of her campaign, I had a hard time talking about her without crying. And I think that that's some of what was so moving for me. I never thought I'd meet a police officer who was so, when I met her when she was a deputy, was so straightforward and willing to talk about, policing in an authentic and real way, in a reflective way. And so I'm looking forward to having someone in office who's just, willing to like talk frankly with people. I mean, to me that's so refreshing. I mean, obviously the harm reduction and changing policies that why she ran, like ending the quotas and the evaluations, but it's just she has such a profoundly different way of thinking about things. It's such a holistic approach. So, I mean, yes, the harm reductions, absolutely. But having someone in office who's just, like a real person, real adult person who's just able to be honest and able to have real practical solutions to things, isn't beholden to like secret deals behind the curtain, that really make it hard for a lot of politicians, I think, to be solution oriented. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm really excited about.
We have to have a hard question.
Okay.
Police officers are empowered to use deadly force, and they are more or less on their own when a call comes in. We have seen far, far too many of our community members, whether they are down the street or 1,000 miles away, we have lost so many of our community members to excessive or unnecessary uses of force.
Correct, yes.
How do you feel when Alyshia talks about how she wants to alter policing in Washtenaw County?
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons why Alyshia and I became friends was how she herself policed, right? She has such emotional intelligence and such commitment to not do harm in her community. Like, the story of her, coming on a mental health call, aware that her being in uniform and showing up as a police officer would likely escalate the situation, having this young woman lunge at her with a knife. And instead of following, sort of standard protocol of, drawing her weapon, drawing her gun and telling this person to back off, she went in and she put her hand on this young woman's arm and held up the knife. The mother snapped the blade off the knife and they were able to get her help, right? So I don't expect all officers are going to be that, but I think that, somebody who's coming in with this kind of awareness of possibility, like they're not coming in rigid. They're not, I know that Alyshia experienced trauma, but she was able to stay open and present and curious and in the moment. And I think that, what's exciting about it is that, she wants to facilitate create a kind of environment where officers can work on their own mental health, where they're going to be supported, so that puts them in a better position where they might, where they're likely to show up, in a healthier way, and not with the kind of, animosity, or kind of, seeing the public as an enemy, or seeing the public as, an other. They're coming in, being able to come in as a person. So to me, that's really exciting. I think that's part of why I never thought I'd be friends with a police officer, because I was really traumatized watching, Sandra Bland and Philando Castile and Michael Brown, in 2016. I mean, I was just kind of shell-shocked and beside myself from that. And, to have met somebody who has worked so tirelessly to show up in a meaningful way, and has an awareness of how, how trainings, are affected by, how well the officers are cared for in other ways, and it just gives me a lot of hope that, we can start having, a real change in culture where, police isn't about this kind of aggressive, knee-jerk, angry, hostile interaction, but, kind of calm and, people being able to stay in their curiosity. And so for me, that's some of the most exciting thing is, really changing that culture of policing to humanize the officers themselves. Often these are people who have not felt particularly humanized throughout their own lives, and, bring in people who are of the community. So you're bringing in people who care about the community, and really changing, the sort of the dynamics. So that's incredibly exciting for me.
The most recent traumatic police interaction that I can remember happened in Illinois, and over 6 years the police officer was bounced around in a number of local agencies until finally the bouncing didn't happen without fatality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Alyshia's endorsement of a police officer registry?
Oh, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think, something that's also remarkable about Alyshia is this kind of humanity about it. It's not about being punitive, it's about protection. And no, I think that again, she, a few months ago she said, "I'm not radical, I'm practical." And what's funny is that because so many politicians, I don't know what, maybe have, conflicts of interest or something, so that the practical solutions seem radical. But, to me that makes a lot of sense, to be able to, track, people from state to state or municipality to municipality, and see what their records have been, and see what issues that they've had. I think that from a managerial perspective, it makes sense to know, who's coming to you and what their background has been, and, if they're in a position to actually work well in your community. So, yeah, I think that is, just sort of a common sense, no-brainer of what we should be doing. And, we have the technology. It's not like we, don't have a technology and everything is stored in, file cabinets in, small towns around the country. This could be really relatively easy to do. So, yeah, I think it makes a whole lot of sense.
We've spent about 2.5 years doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and now we have a chance to look back and also look forward. What are you planning on doing next?
Well, I'm starting graduate school this month. I'm working on my MFA in studio art at Eastern Michigan University, so there's that. I still plan to be active in local politics. I wasn't able to make the Board of Commissioners meeting last night. Just still pretty wiped out from the last couple years, and especially the last few days. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think that there are a lot of candidates who didn't win, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done to bring young, new, and diversity of people coming into politics. Whose voices haven't been represented. So there's a lot of work that I want to be a part of that makes it easier for people to run for office, where they have financial support, they have some know-how and savvy. And I think people who've worked on Alyshia's campaign are interested in that. Kat Layton is interested in that. Some of the people who who didn't win their election, are interested in doing that. So I think that's where some of my energy is likely to go too.
I want to thank you, Ginger, for letting me ask you these questions. Do you have any commercials that you need to be said?
You mean like, do you want to book a massage with me? What kind of commercials are you?
So this is the fun part
Okay.
of the podcast.
Okay.
What kind of a commercial or a project or an interesting thing that about Washtenaw County, about Ypsilanti, that you want people to know about?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I think that one of the things about Washtenaw County is that it's incredibly beautiful. As much building that's happening, it's still really verdant, especially this time of year. Really beautiful and lush and green. I think that, there's Ypsilanti in particular is just really, friendly and lively and homey in a particular way. Like, people know each other and they are willing to talk to each other. There's a little bit more time that they can invest in one another. I live in Scioto Township. I grew up in Ann Arbor, and Ann Arbor used to be a little bit more like that when I was young. I would walk down the street and I would talk to small business owners, and I would talk to, run into hundreds of people I knew in a day, it felt like. But I think Ypsilanti really, is kind of in that space now where you walk down the street and you know people and you can have good conversations. So I think those are some really beautiful things about this area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You heard it here. Visit Ypsilanti, because when you're here, you're home. Ginger, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Mark.